Greetings! This is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, with yet another Asimov short story review. And this time, we get a story that has the distinction of being both his first sail to Galaxy, and it also comes in Galaxy's very own first issue that they came up with, which was the October 1950. So, that's pretty good. They have a neat way of introducing Galaxy that I really like. It's on the back. And you'll never see this in Galaxy. So here we have these two little quotes. I'm going to read these. They have nothing to do with Asimov's story, but I just love this. Is kind of the nature of Galaxy as a magazine. Okay. Jets blasting. Bat Durston came screeching down through the atmosphere. A blazing edge. A tiny planet 7 billion light years from Sol. He cut out his super hyperdrive for the landing. And at that point, a tall, lean spaceman stepped out of the tail assembly, proton gun blaster in a space-tanned hand. Get back from those controls, Bat Durston. The tall stranger lipped thinly. You don't know it, but this is your last space trip. Now here's another one. Hoofs drumming, Bat Durston came galloping down through the narrow pass at Eagle Gulch, a tiny gold colony 400 miles north of Tombstone. He spurred hard for a low overhang of rim rock, and at that point a tall, lean wrangler stepped out from behind a high boulder, 6-shooter in a sun-tanned hand. Rear back and dismount, Bat Durston. Tall stranger lipped thinly. You don't know it, but this is your last saddle jaunt through these here parts. Sound alike? Well, they should. One is merely a Western transplanted to some alien and impossible planet. The other, I assume, must be just the Western that gets transplanted before its transplantation. If this is your idea of science fiction, you're welcome to it. But you'll never find it here in Galaxy. What you will find in Galaxy is the finest science fiction, authentic, plausible, thoughtful, written by authors who do not automatically switch over from crime waves to Earth invasions, by people who know and love science fiction, for people who also know and love it. Now, my only comment on all that, are Westerns really that bad? I'm not convinced of that. Not counting the ones that you would get on TV, especially in the 1950s. You know, some of them got a little more sophisticated towards the end of the Western era, you know, but some of them, I guess, could be depressingly stupid, I suppose. But that's TV, and science fiction in TV and movies wasn't so great either. So, enough of that. Let's get to Asimov's story. So, the story here is in the very, it's just listed as a short story because it is a short story. And it is Darwinian Poolroom by Isaac Asimov, page 152. That's all there is in the table of contents about it. So, what do we have on page 152? By the way, there's an interesting background. Asimov had, for the longest time, written all these stories for astounding science fiction. And now, there were other magazines, and some that he was able to sell stories to. Amazing, Astonishing, Super Science stories being the main ones. Future fiction, he had a few. And, you know, there was a lot of different magazines that he had sold to. You know, at least one, and, you know, I'm just listening to ones he's got more than one story in. But a lot of those went by the wayside. World War II, paper had to be rationed. And so a lot of this stuff went away. And apparently even after World War II, some of this stuff had to be rationed to the point that the Ziff Davis, the publishers for Astounding, had a whole bunch of magazines and they decided to stop all of them. And Asimov learning this, what am I going to do? And then, you know, then he discovered, except we're keeping Astounding science fiction. We're dumping everything else, but except we are going to keep Astounding science fiction. And he said, but it did kind of make it clear, is he just one editor writer, or, you know, could he have more broad? This was something he was really worried about. He makes this sale to Horace Gold, but it was a rushed sale. He didn't have a lot of time to prepare much of the story. It was probably more important how long it was, so that it would fit what was left in the magazine rather than what the story itself was. And so he kind of felt like, I'm not sure that really counts. But luckily, the next month we'll sell a really good story to Galaxy, and that'll be the next one. But for this one, it's actually not a weak story at all. In fact, it is in some ways, and he so regards as kind of another prototype of those kinds of stories where you have a group of people who regularly gather around a dinner table, such as the Black Widowers, or some other kind of table, like such as the Union Club, and so forth, as he'd also attempted with the Ananias, Honorable Society of Ananias, as a one-shot before. This is kind of another attempt at that, only they don't have a name, they're just some random characters hanging out at a bar having a conversation, and that really, in effect, is the story. So the only thing that's really interesting is just what is their conversation, and they're talking over different speculations. Could the, I don't know, evolution, creation, whatever you want to call it, of life on this planet be in some ways like a pool room? Well, let's take a look. No blurbs on the table of contents page, but it had a little one on the main title page here. I'll read it, and then you can see it along with the artwork. And it says, creation's meaning is an awesome secret. Or maybe not. Okay. And here you've got it. There's these people shooting pool on a pool table of outer space. You can look carefully. There's a planet there that obviously looks a lot like Saturn. Another similar sized one, maybe that's supposed to be Jupiter. Some other less recognizable planets. Who knows? Maybe one of them there in the other corner might be the Earth and Moon. Maybe that's the sun serving as the cue ball. I don't know. But you got these people playing pool on a pool table that they have the whole universe, which kind of captures the idea of it. That's a neat thing. So you got these guys coming up with this question about, well, can creation just be like somebody sticking the balls in the pockets? That wouldn't be very creative or very interesting. Did it all come totally random chance? Was it purposeful? They're not trying to reach answers here. They're just kind of bringing all kinds of curious, bar-type people thoughts on the question. But they get into things like, why did the dinosaurs pass away? I'm thinking maybe at that point they didn't yet know about that big meteorite or something. So, and if that's what it was, if they didn't know, then that's like this big mystery. We'll hear more about the dinosaurs in a couple more installments, by the way. But for now, it's just kind of this big mystery, and they're saying, well, what happened to them? Well, as far as the small ones are concerned, there's the question of competition. If some of the reptiles developed hair and warm blood, they could adapt themselves to variations in climate more efficiently. They wouldn't have to stay out of direct sunlight. They would not get sluggish as soon as the temperature dropped below 80 Fahrenheit. They would develop intelligence of a sort. Therefore, they would win the race for food. So, there's two changes I've identified between this and as it got published later on. One had to do with how well these dinosaurs had lasted, and so let's see here. It's like they lasted 300 million years, and then that's 300 million years, and then that would be like 299 million years longer than we have. And when that got reprinted later on, that had to be revised down. Apparently 298 million more years than we have, we humans, that is, because they weren't sure how long humans had been around in those days. 1 million was kind of a reasonable guess. 2 million appears to be something that, at least from skeletal remains, seems to make some kind of sense. And there's a very tiny grammatical change. Neither this nor that becomes a neither this period, and then like a new sentence, nor that. Irrelevant, really, just grammatical glitch. Other than that, they seem to be, as far as I can tell, identical. So, let's see. Continuing on here. Snake lizards and turtles are very much in business. What about the ocean? The saurians adapted to that in the shape of ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. They vanished too, and there were no newly developed forms of life based on radical evolutionary advances to compete with them. As near as I can make out, the highest form of ocean life are the fish, mammals aside, and they came before the ichthyosaurs. So how do you account for that? Fish are just as cold-blooded and even more primitive. And in the ocean, there's no question of mass and diminishing returns since the water does all the work of support. The sulfur bottom whale, I wonder if that's the big blue whale under an earlier name, but why would a blue whale be named sulfur bottom? I don't know. And maybe it's a different whale. Is larger than any dinosaur that ever lived. So, what's the use of talking about the inefficiency of cold blood and saying that at temperatures below 80, cold-blooded animals become sluggish? Fish are very happy at continuous temperatures of about 35, and there is nothing sluggish about a shark. Yeah, I don't admit that. So then, why did the dinosaurs quietly steal off the earth, leaving their bones behind? Well, they were part of the plan. Once they'd served their purpose, they were gotten rid of. How? In a properly arranged Velikovskian catastrophe? Well, given the bit about the meteorite, maybe that's not so far from the truth. A striking comet? Well, yeah, that seems to be the current belief. The finger of God? Well, I don't know. No, of course not. They died out naturally. Just naturally. So I guess it comes down to humans and so forth. And bacteria, diseases, and the ability to fashion some of the nutrients in our own bodies that we need, but not others. We can't make vitamin C at all, for example. So that makes us very dependent on being able to find vitamin C somewhere. So then they're thinking, well, the dinosaurs grew really large, and then they reached some sort of a peak, and it was all dead ends. They had nowhere else to go. Now maybe humanity, their big specialty, of course, is their brains. But intellect maybe only goes yay far. Maybe even if you're 100 times smarter, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot more than we already do as it stands right now. Or maybe we might, who knows? We'll have to wait till we're 100 times smarter, then maybe we might get an idea. Interesting coincidences that could have some significance regarding the future of humanity as a species on this planet. I was just thinking it might not be entirely coincidence that a new race may be coming and an old one going entirely through the efforts of this cerebral mechanism, pointing at his head. In what way? Stop me if I'm wrong, but aren't the sciences of nucleonics and cybernetics reaching simultaneous peaks? Aren't we inventing hydrogen bombs and thinking machines at the same time? Is that coincidence or part of the divine purpose? So, and it concludes with, that was about all for the lunch hour. It had begun as logic chopping just to kill time, but since then, well, I've been wondering. So, okay. It's not a bad little story, but as I say, it's not much story to it per se. It's a discussion more than anything else. Which makes me think, actually now, some of those old discussions that Plato would have back in those ancient Greek philosophy. You look at a discussion between Plato and Socrates and various other figures that would come in or go out, whatever. And, nothing's happening. It's just people sitting around talking about stuff. But they're philosophizing, and sometimes the philosophy gets really interesting. So anyway, that story appeared there. It did finally get gathered up in by Jupiter, which basically was meant to try to pick up a lot of the stories that hadn't been published elsewhere. That was really the whole point. So this story did not get picked up. The next one we'll find does get picked up in a much earlier book, but it's like, well, we missed a bunch of stories, so they put this book out. One thing I'm noticing about this book, it's very thin. It really is. Yet it has a whole bunch of stories. What that means is there's going to be a lot of stories from the 1950s now that are rather short. I hope that means that my reviews can be a bit shorter. At any rate, this one wasn't exactly shorter, and I will just thank you all for your forbearance and patiently listening to me.